So if we go back to demand forecasting, right, generative AI doesn't necessarily change the algorithms and the smarts and machine learning algorithms that we're using for demand forecasting, but it does change how a user can interact with those results and slice and dice and ask questions of that results, right?
Welcome to another episode of Data Strategy Unraveled. I'm your host, Kendra Reed, Principal Data and Gen AI Strategy Specialist here at AWS. And so if you've been watching our channel for the last few months here, we've been noticing that we've been slowly iterating through various industries and understanding how a data strategy can play a factor in these different areas. And today we're going to talk about retail and CPG and how different companies are utilizing the data strategy to help transform this industry. And to help with this discussion, I have a good friend here, Sam Klein. Hey, Sam, how you doing?
Good, Kendra. Thanks for having me.
Hey, happy to have you here. Um, Before we get started, we like to have our guests here to talk about, kind of where you're zooming in from and what you do here at AWS.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great to be part of the channel, and I love what you do, Kendra. There's some great conversations I've heard over the last few months and years. So I'm being in from Melbourne, Australia. So I'm part of the broader APJ team. I'm a principal data and Gen AI strategist, and part of that global data strategy team. And that gives us the benefits and the privilege of working with our customers on how do we really help them shape what their modern data strategy looks like, what it means for them, how to institute change, how to think really big about what they can do for their organization with data and analytic capabilities, as well as really pragmatically where they start and get momentum on that journey.
Okay, okay. And for though our viewers, you probably notice it looks a little bit darker in my background as opposed to various other videos. That's because we're doing this, what is it, 7:30 p.m. my time, and those early your time. So we're
Yep.
having to work out that time difference there.
All good.
Um, but yeah, we're happy to have you here. So, let's jump right into this.
Yep.
What are some of the trends that you're seeing right now when it comes to the retail and CPG space?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what we're seeing, you can apply to supply chains more generally, but particularly within retail and CPG, we're seeing a lot of demand and desire to really line up all those different parts of their supply chain to give them the flexibility and agility they need in what is a really quickly changing market, right? And that's consumer demands. It's all sorts of industry and regulations being put on these organizations, and so they really want that ability to be able to flex, to understand their end to end, to make better decisions, and innovate and experiment in some cases as well, right? And sometimes their legacy supply chain management capabilities just don't allow them that flexibility and agility that they think they really need to be competitive in today's market.
I see, I see. And so when you're thinking about intertwining, a data strategy with this, um, what are some of the main challenges that they're facing? They're trying to create that transformation within this industry.
Yeah, I mean, similar to many organizations, the silos of data and the silos of information at different, parts or divisions or organizations or locations in some places typically remains a problem. And so being able to connect those data sources and elevate the conversation to look at the end-to-end optimization opportunities is really difficult for organizations when they're so busy, in their day-to-day firefighting and trying to make good on their current commitments. What we try and do is really help elevate that conversation so they see the art of the possible and the benefits to their entire organization as we start to bring some of this stuff together. And again, that think big, start small, and then scale fast as you get that adoption and excitement and people realize the opportunity in front of them. It becomes really exciting for them to think about how they transform their organization based on some of these insights. And so really the silos, some of the legacy way that they've been organized, the typical sort of blockers in this space. And so having that opportunity to bring those people into a room and really talk about what it could and should be really opens their minds and gets them excited about the art of the possible.
That's interesting that you bring that up about the challenges that they're facing because, like you mentioned, it's very similar to other industries as well. That siloed
Yep.
data, really having to bring that together. And I know there's different ways different industries are tackling this. And you talk a little bit about it, but let's look at it a little bit more. How exactly are they're responding to that challenge, and how are they bringing in that data strategy to really help with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends on where demand in the organization is coming from to drive this change. And often, it's, oh, we've got this black box of demand forecasting, and we don't really know what happened. Someone put it in 10 years ago. There's no documentation, and we don't know how to add more features or more demand or a better understanding of what those sort of key drivers are of their forecasts, right? And so it's really unpicking that and getting them much more agility in, feeding in weather patterns or feeding in macroeconomic data or feeding in other things, not just, hey, what happened this time last year and how do we apply that to the demand forecast for this year? You can get much more nuanced and much more scientific, and therefore much better accuracy through your forecasting with some of those types of opportunities. And sometimes it's really just about actually stringing the data together to get that end-to-end visibility, right? Because it's difficult, it's manual, it's Excel spreadsheets, it's, all sorts of different databases, and there's people just spending an inordinate amount of time trying to stitch that together on a daily, monthly basis. And so as you can start to automate and integrate that data, it just opens their eyes to, some of the inefficiencies, but also opportunities to really clean that sort of stuff up. So there's lots of different ways to approach it, and it depends a little bit on what the pressing needs are for the organization at the time, and really starting there and being pragmatic enough to get that proof point in and really open them up to much broader conversations.
Okay. And is there any customers that come to mind when you're thinking about that, of how they've applied some of these things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, we're working with a couple of customers actively at the moment just around that demand forecasting opportunity. And we've started, again, really pragmatically with a couple of SKUs and a couple of product lines, and got them really excited about how they are automating those sort of things and then applying it to their broader broader product set, and proving that automation in doing that capability is giving them much better accuracy and therefore much better visibility and therefore much better decision making down the track. And then there's another retailer in Australia that's we've started with the sales side of their business and really empowered their sales teams with much better insights about their customers. And now that's flowing back to, okay, well, how's that starting to drive demand all the way back through the supply chain? And then there's other examples like Domino's Pizzas around forecasting demand and helping to then appropriately staff stores around those sort of forecasts, rather than just a manual rostering sort of capability. And so that application isn't just for retail CPG. There's application across all sorts of areas, including manufacturing, and all sorts of great examples and interesting customers where we're helping them sort of bring that opportunity to life.
Yeah, I was going to say that demand forecasting use case can probably be applied to many different areas.
Yeah.
Thinking about
And
that.
it's often, often a great place to start as well, because it's actually quite defined and not super complex,
Right.
but just starting to educate and understand those factors. And we're very fortunate in our roles, Kendre, as you appreciate, that we have this, Amazon supply chain behind us that we have so many lessons from, so much learning, customer promises, the smarts around the fulfillment centers and the robotics there, and the algorithms that help us go, how do we meet that customer promise, and what are the trade-offs, and what are the different aspects of that we need to get right. And so, helping our customers understand some of that Amazon supply chain learnings over the last 20, 30 years, getting them to a fulfillment center and seeing sort of the robotics nature of what happens there, and how they're organizing inventory to be able to meet that customer demand, rather than, just to have a nice, neat warehouse. Like, some of those sort of things are really, really powerful lessons that we can share with our customers, and then sort of make it really fit for them and their problems and their opportunities.
Yeah. That whole Amazon warehouse and the way it operates is baffling every time I get a chance to see it.
Yeah.
It's definitely a place where a lot of learners can come from. Now, I'm going to ask you about a specific area that everyone's talking about now, which is generative AI, right? How can generative AI play a role in this space, or have you seen it play a role in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I'm loving is the maturing of the industry to, how do I run it from how do I just run a Gen AI project to, oh, actually Gen AI can help us solve some of these problems that we're fronting into, right? And that's a nice shift in the narrative, because we're starting to see a lot of Gen AI capabilities being embedded into the solution sets that we're bringing to life as well. So if we go back to demand forecasting, right? generative AI doesn't necessarily change the algorithms and the smarts and machine learning algorithms that we're using for demand forecasting, but it does change how a user can interact with those results and slice and dice and ask questions of that results, right? So it's not necessarily solving the problems in different ways, but it is making a lot of that more accessible and more interactive and contextual as you're starting to interact with some of those capabilities. And so, and there's all sorts of different opportunities for Gen AI to really boost the capabilities that we're providing. But it's not how do we solve a problem with Gen AI, it's what problems are we trying to solve? And oh, actually Gen AI is a really great way of solving this problem. So it's a slight maturing, I think, of the conversation and the understanding with our different custom sets on what that brings to the table.
I see. I see. So as we wrap up here, how do you suggest, organizations start to implement some of the things that you discussed today?
I think you've got to have that desire and want to change. And then we are fortunate that we can bring all sorts of different ideas, case studies, references to the table to help customers understand what others are doing. And then bringing the people across those, supply chain is many different parts, right? And we often just gloss over, oh, we'll just fix supply chain, but there's all sorts of individual components, and it's as strong as its weakest link and all those sort of things. So understanding the benefits of bringing that supply chain capability together holistically and end to end is really powerful. And so bringing the right leaders from your organization, whether it's in a warehouse or manufacturing plan or digital sales or which part of that, it doesn't necessarily matter. You just need the strong leadership conviction that, hey, we understand why this is important. We understand the agility and the visibility and the decision making that this would provide as we bring it together. And so really capture the hearts and minds of the organization about what it means to them. And then we've got all sorts of ways to help our customers sort of bring that to life, right? Like I said, thinking really big, starting small, but with a view of how can you scale that as you prove success through that. So definitely engage your account managers, engage data strategy team. We've got some brilliant supply chain expertise in AWS, but also in the broader Amazon unit that we have the benefit of bringing to the table. So yeah, just engage and be open to the art of the possible. And then it's a great conversation from there once people buy in.
Okay. Well, thanks, Sam, so much for providing this information around, supply chain and especially the retail and CPG area. We know there's just one part of supply chain. There's many different areas that they could fall into. But it was very valuable information. And for our viewers, be sure to check the links below to learn more information about the overall supply chain and some of the things that Sam mentioned today. And thank you, Sam, again. And we see our viewers, see you again in our next Data Strategy Unraveled episode.
Thanks, Kendra.
Thank you.